Hello and welcome to video 2 of our population ecology PowerPoint and lesson. So last time we left off talking about different symbiotic relationships. So one of them was mutualism or a mutualistic relationship. That means both organisms are benefiting. And a really great example is down here, the bee and the flower. And why this is such a great example of mutualism is that the bee gets food from the pollen and they make honey from it, and the flower benefits because it's able to take its pollen and transport it to other locations, which kind of increases the gene pool and helps with reproduction. So the bee gets a nice meal and the flower gets to spread its gametes or its genes. Then we have commensalism. This is where one organism is benefiting, but the other organism isn't being affected. I gave the example earlier of these barnacles riding this whale right here. So the barnacles are basically getting a free ride and being transported around the ocean, and the whale is unaffected at all. Parasitism is a plus negative, which means one organism is going to benefit and the other organism is actually being harmed. So these are tapeworms down here. Tapeworms infest a lot of different animals and live inside the digestive tract and actually take nutrients from the host. This up here would be kind of like a tick. Ticks often will jump onto different mammals and drink their blood. Same thing with a leech. Okay, that's a leech down there. So obviously this is when one organism is really not benefiting from this relationship and can often, sometimes even lead to death if the parasite takes over enough. Then we have neutralism. Neutralism is when both organisms aren't really benefiting or being harmed. So here's a watering hole out in the savanna, and you can see that there's at least 3 or 4 different types of animals in that picture drinking from the same water hole. But this zebra and this antelope right here aren't really in a relationship that's either harming or benefiting. They're just both kind of there drinking the water from this watering hole. Competition. This is really important when we look at population dynamics, especially when we look at this interspecific competition. So interspecific competition is when there's 2 different species. Sometimes it can be a predator-prey relationship where the predators are eating the prey, or it can even be 2 predators kind of going after the same food source. We also have intraspecific competition. This is when 2 organisms from the same species are having competition. A lot of times when it's intraspecific, it's going to be due to mating. It could be 2 males fighting for reproductive purposes and trying to attract different mates. You can see here the two bighorn sheep going at it. Down here, this is, I think, a hyena and a lion. They're probably fighting over a carcass or something that the lion has already killed. A lot of time interspecific competition can lead to populations either becoming extinct in an environment or having to move because somebody else is already filling in that niche. Okay, this lion right here might be filling in the niche of eating zebras. This hyena is going to have to find something else to eat or kind of move on. All right, competition reduction. This is a little bit of what we were talking about in the last slide. So 2 big things we need to talk about here is resource partitioning and character displacement. So when we have competition, like I said in the previous slide, something has to happen to allow those 2 populations to coexist. Because if there's too much competition going on, that means they're probably filling the same niche, which isn't going to be beneficial. And only one species can fill one niche or the role of that species in that ecosystem. So you can't have, hundreds of different populations going after the same food source. That's just not going to work. So what we tend to see is different populations occupying slightly different niches. So for example, we might have these lizards down here. This is a bunch of different types of lizards. And instead of all living in the same area of the tree, they have kind of claimed their own areas. So they're slightly filling a different niche, a different role when perching in that area. And that might be for reproductive purposes, and now they're able to attract their mates earlier. We also see character displacement. This can lead to what we call sympatric speciation, which means that the species may not be separated by any type of land. They might not be separated by different ponds. They might not be separated by a canyon. They actually live in the exact same environment, but they're filling the same niche. So one of them has to adapt. So you can see here, these are two birds that probably came from the same common ancestor. And both of the populations of birds were filling the same niche. So what happened is they started to develop and adapt so they could fill different niche roles. So you can see here the beak size is different, which means that they're going to be able to eat different types of food. So due to competition, we see different species kind of evolving and adapting to fill a new role so they can stay in that environment. All right, predator-prey relationships. This is a great example of competition right here. And you see these two animals. This is a lynx and a hare, a snowshoe hare or rabbit. And this is probably the most famous example ever documented of a predator-prey relationship. You will see this example many, many a times in your future biology classes. This is how they really teach that predator-prey relationship. So this was done, I believe, in Alaska. And when you look down here, look at this graph. So this is the number in the population, and then this is the year that they estimated the population. The snowshoe rabbit is going to be the not filled in circles, and the lynx is going to be the filled in circles. And what you can see in this predator-prey relationship is every time the snowshoe hare population went up, the lynx population went up. And when the lynx population went up, that means they could start to eat more hare. So then what happened? The hare population would go down. And if the hare population went down, that means the lynx don't have as many rabbits to eat, so their population would go down. If the lynx population went down, the snowshoe rabbit didn't have as many predators around, so their population would go up. So we see this kind of cycle where if hare population goes up, lynx population goes up. But then that's going to cause hare population to go down, which then causes lynx population to go down. So it's basically this kind of cycling of populations, and it really shows how these two species interact with each other. So now we're going to talk about the specific type of coloration and adaptations when looking at predators and prey. One is really cool. I like this one, the aposematic coloring. This is coloring that's going to be super, super bright, so that it's kind of warning other organisms to stay away. The Batesian mimicry, this is a copycat, so you could have two species. One of them is a deadly dangerous species, but then the other one could be totally not poisonous or anything, but copy the same colors or behaviors as the dangerous one to avoid any prey. Then we have Mullerian mimicry. This is basically when we have poisonous species resembling each other so that prey know to stay away. Camouflage, blending into the environment, obviously really important when you're trying to avoid predators or even maybe be out of sight from prey. And then disruptive coloring. This obscures the size or the shape of the organism. So these are just a few examples of aposematic coloring. So stay away from me, I am dangerous. We see a lot of this in poison dart frogs. Okay, these are some very poisonous creatures. Obviously spiders have that aposematic warning. This is just, I am dangerous, I am bright, I am colorful, don't touch me. Betasian mimicry. This is a very classic example here. So one of these is a coral snake and the other is a non-dangerous snake. So they look very similar. If you walked around and saw these two snakes in the wild, you would think, oh my gosh, those are probably the same snakes. But no, one of them is actually very, very harmless. One of them is very poisonous. Mullerian mimicry. This is basically showing that all of these organisms are dangerous, so they have similar coloring. I like the wasp example the best. These are all different species of wasps. And you can clearly see they have similar coloring, which says, stay away from me. Camouflage. Can you even see some of the animals in these pictures? Isn't it amazing? Okay, we have some sort of lizard here. Let's see, there's a spider or a bug of some sort. There's a caterpillar. It's really, really cool how these animals can blend into their environment. Wow, look at this guy here. You can barely see him on that log. These are more examples of camouflage. Ooh, I love the seahorse picture. Very, very cool. The Arctic fox, okay, able to make sure. Pomeranian. It's just amazing how these animals have evolved to really fit into their environment. Beautiful. Some sort of bug blending into the flowers. This is a picture of obscuring, once again, kind of the size of the organism. So if you look down here, if you were a fish looking above, you'd only see the white, and it kind of obscures how big this actual whale is when you got up to it. Okay, so how do abiotic factors fit into all of this? Why do we have all these different colorations? Why are we trying to hide from predators and preys? Are ecosystems static or dynamic? Take a second, think about these two things, and we'll come back. So abiotic factors fit into all of this because we have to have the right amount of resources like water and sunlight to make all of this happen. And as you can see, ecosystems are extremely, extremely dynamic. They're constantly changing. If they were static, that means they'd be the same all the time. But we obviously see populations moving and changing at a rapid pace. So what happens if there is some sort of kind of interference in the ecosystem? Let's say there's a fire in the forest. How does this forest kind of come back from this? Well, we have to talk about primary succession. And when a forest burns down, there's going to be nothing there for a very long time. What we tend to see in primary succession is we're going to have more moss and lichen and smaller plants come first. Then we're going to have some larger kind of shrubs. And as we transition years later, we do get that whole forest back. But it's really important to understand that why would there be nothing? Well, there was probably some fire here that broke all of this down. And primary succession is going to take a very long time to bring it all back. Many other things can happen. We can have volcanic eruptions. We can have landslides. Oftentimes it's going to be some sort of human interference, unfortunately. All right, secondary succession. This is more of this area here. So this is going to be more of your primary succession. This is going to be more of your secondary succession. And this is basically taking all of this and making sure that we're getting back to our original state after a disturbance. And we've talked about different disturbances before. Fire and floods are a big one. So we're going to go ahead and stop here for this video, and we're going to finish up our last couple of slides in video 3. Please watch again if you need to review. You are going to be doing many activities that have to do with those symbiotic relationships. It's a very interesting topic, and I hope you enjoyed it.